So welcome everybody. Thank you for the introduction. Can you imagine a world where nutritious food is available for everyone from healthy and living soil? Yes, you can. Of course, that's why we are here. And that's why I'm here, because my mission is to increase soil literacy among people and understand this black box where all sorts of things are going on and we are so much dependent on. So let's help me to do a quick survey about you guys. Who has a garden here among you? Okay, like 60-70% of the people who are here. Who has a farm? Okay, what kind of farm do you have?
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Okay, so you used to have a farm. Okay, and you are producing for the market. Okay, excellent. So mostly like vegetables. For seeds. Okay, that's very nice. Okay, for seeds. Okay, thank you. Anybody else is like producing stuff for the market? Okay, so you are mainly, because I'm asking this to be able to tailor my message to you, tailor it better. So I have examples, a few examples from veggie gardens and a few examples from broadacre agriculture. So we're going to see both. Okay, so the question for my presentation for today was whether we want life or whether we want dust. And the reason I'm asking this because a year and a half ago there was the biggest road accident in Hungary, the biggest accident in history. And dust, soil was being blown by the wind onto the highway, and 40 cars bumped into each other. Cars were burning down, many people got injured, and some people died. And they started to think about what actually caused this accident. It must be the farmers, it must be climate change, and everything in between. And at the end of the day, if we think about how on earth it is possible for wind to pick up soil and blow it to distances, the answer is not very difficult. We are in a vicious cycle of disturbing our land all the time, tilling it on large hectares, and then allowing that soil to completely degrade, get it depleted from organic matter, and then this is a vicious cycle when you have less and less organic matter in the soil, less and less roots, and less vegetation. Now, as I was actually driving in this country where I saw wheat harvested on the fields, I also noticed that many farmers actually don't really do deep tillage here. Is that correct? Do you see a lot of tillage? I saw some really shallow tillage. So the very important thing is that we leave as much residues on the surface and as much roots as possible. So in addition to continuous disturbance and organic matter depletion, we have drier and drier weather. And this drier and drier weather decreases the opportunity for vegetation to grow. So again, this is part of the vicious cycle. We don't store, when we don't have organic matter in the soil, we don't store enough moisture. And if there is not enough moisture in the soil, that is usually held by organic matter and a little bit by clay particles, then there is no evaporation. Not enough evaporation, not enough vegetation for microclimates, so we don't have the local cloud formation, and we hardly have any rain locally. And this map shows drought in Hungary. This was a couple of weeks ago. The entire country didn't receive enough rain, so it was severe. Like the red parts are, where is the pointer? Here. The red parts are drought, and the dark parts are severe drought. So the entire country was in drought. Right now, we had some rain, so the parts that are currently still in drought are this. That used to be severe a couple of weeks ago. Nem tudod, hogy mit kell mutatni. But you can try it now. So, in Hungary, it is very difficult to grow corn right now. And some farmers are saying that they are not going to grow corn anymore. Go with the next one. I do it, okay? Én csinálom. Here is my little girl last year, my helper. Again, in the middle of the summer, like they are not going to be able to harvest much of this. And we have to act on every scale to reverse this degradation. Desertification. I'm not sure about the situation in Slovakia, but in Hungary, desertification is a serious issue, and some parts of the country, the Great Plains, are already in the process of becoming a desert. This picture wasn't taken in Sahara. It was taken in the Great Plains of Hungary. And the wind is just blowing the sand, which has maybe like 0.5% or less organic matter. And this is the direction where we are heading right now. This is not new, okay? This has been happening over and over and over again. The most recent big drought that affected millions of people was in the United States in the 30s. You remember from the history books, after the First World War, we had all these, even after the Industrial Revolution, but especially after the First World War, we had these amazing machines, all these amazing chemicals that revolutionized agriculture. And as the population has been growing in the land of opportunities in the United States, people were running out of land to cultivate. And they were moving in the middle of the country to the prairies, those enormous grasslands, which were actually created by millennia and eons, basically millions of years, on loess, on silt. And as they plowed those fields, within a decade, they managed to degrade that part of the US, which kind of was considered to be the breadbasket, the land of opportunities. So the prairies were destroyed in a couple of decades. And as farmers were going basically into poverty, bankrupt, dying, a lot of farmers, légy szíves, ezt fejezd be, mert ez nagyon kellemetlen, ahogy így izélsz a lábaddal. Jó, köszönöm. So basically, the government of the United States realized that this is an issue, and they created the Soil Conservation Service. And they started to reverse this, and they were able to restore the prairies. Okay? And this process has been going on. And of course, it goes against the industrial interests of selling more and more machines and more fertilizers. But also, that's the place where we get a lot of information about how to restore soil, as well as Australia, where they have 200, 300 millimeters of rain per year. So there are the examples. And some parts of Ukraine, like the Crimea Island or Peninsula, the same story, where they are able to grow food with regenerative agriculture practices, with very minimal rain. So just one more idea about history. Who has read David Montgomery's book, Dirt? I highly recommend it. I saw only one hand kind of like raised and then pulled back real quick. This is essentially goes through the history. Like David Montgomery is a geologist and he wanted to write a book about erosion, soil erosion. And he ended up, as he was researching, writing a history book that shows us 10,000 years of agricultural history of humanity. And we can see through this book that soil degradation goes hand in hand with the rise and collapse of civilizations. So as a civilization, think about Mesopotamia, the Egyptians, the Romans, etc. Sorry? Exactly, the Mayas. Absolutely, exactly the same story. I just didn't see you from the... yeah, you are hiding there. So as the population starts to grow, so as agriculture becomes more and more efficient, the population starts to grow. More food, more people. We are the same as any other animal on this planet. If there is more food, there is more people. So more people, more need for agricultural land, more and more intensive agriculture, even on those seemingly basic scales with basic tools that people had back in the time. Forests were cleared, soils started to become depleted, and droughts and famines and erosion started to degrade the soil. And this has a 1,000-year cycle. 1,000 years to rise for a civilization, and 1,000 years to collapse, and then 1,000 years for the soil to regenerate. This is on average, and it's not true, of course, everywhere, but this is kind of a cycle that we have here. So you can guess what part of this cycle we are on right now. We are able to produce food artificially, very well. Really nice looking food from some seemingly soil-like matrices. But in reality, we are fertilizer bags on 2 feet. And our food contains the basic elements that we consider as important in agriculture, but we are starving in terms of quality, like nutritionally, we are starving, and therefore there are all these modern, Western, civilized diseases that we encounter today. So we still have food, but our health is going down really seriously, as well as we are around the tipping point where our soils are no longer going to be able to sustain us. Soil degradation around the world. You can imagine like most of the soil is degraded. And what causes the degradation? It's mostly, if we are looking in Europe, it's mostly industry, agriculture, overgrazing, and forest clearings, which all these go hand in hand. So what can we do these were the bad news, and now I'm trying to move on to the solutions. Hopefully, I didn't spend more than 10 minutes on the bad news. So what can we do to reverse soil degradation? How can we build soil? It's very simple. Who knows the permaculture principles here? Who is aware of the permaculture principles? Okay, most people. Great. Permaculture principles are great because they give us kind of like a guiding post, a guiding light to act in an appropriate way in our local environment. So we have a context, we have some needs and some circumstances, and we apply the permaculture principles in order to achieve a functioning system. Soil health also has principles which manifest in different ways depending on your local environment. And they are extremely simple. And whenever you are working with soil, doing your gardening, you keep in mind these really simple principles. Do not disturb soil or minimize disturbance. Always cover. Have roots 24/7. Increase the diversity and integrate animals in your system. Okay, and I am going to kind of open these topics up for you a little bit. But first of all, let's think a little bit about what healthy soil means. When you hold a handful of soil in your hands, what is it made out of? What is it made out of? Okay, so most of the times when we hold like a handful of hands, we feel like we think that it's mostly solid, right? It seems like as if it was solid materials, some sort of minerals, depending on the parent material, sand, silt, and clay, right? But that's just part of the story. Half of that handful must be pore space, must be channels, capillaries, cavities. That's where the soil is able to store water, and that's where the soil is able to store air. And guess what? That's where life happens. So that 5% here, which I designated as 5% organic matter, in some soils, maybe perhaps in your garden soil, it's 10% because you are using a lot of compost and always replenish this organic matter from an outside source. But then if you think about that desertifying Hungarian landscape, that has maybe 0.5% organic matter or less. On average, in Hungary, and perhaps in Slovakia as well, and Czech Republic and Ukraine, we have no more than 1.5 to maybe 3% in the best soils. Those Chernozyms that used to be 7-8% organic matter today are maybe 3. And that's the most important part of our soils. Because soil organic matter has multiple functions. It's very important for structure building. Structure means how much of those pore spaces, how much of those cavities we have in the soil. And then soil life. Organic matter is nothing else but living beings, or those that used to live and no longer live for some reason, because they were eaten by someone else. Most of the times they are eaten by someone else or died for old age. That's a little bit less frequent. And then also for nutrient cycling. So organic matter is the essence of functioning of our soils. Who has learned in their university years or school years about humus? Okay. Who thinks that they know what humus is? It's like, maybe I do. Yeah, then forget about it all. At least what we learned is that there is this miraculous compound in our soil, which is called humus, which is able to persist even for a millennia in our soils, because there is this magical chemical reaction in the soil from different parts of decomposing organic matter, but there is a chemical reaction that binds organic matter, like decomposing organic matter together. You don't need soil life for that, and creates that really complex structure. And therefore, this has been going on for 200 years, this theory, and therefore we didn't really care much about humus. We thought that it doesn't really decompose very much. However, Lehman and Kleber, here is the citation, published an article in Nature in about 10 years ago. And they actually pulled out a research from a Russian scientist from the 30s. His name is Waxman, and later on he moved on to create antibiotics, and he got like a Nobel Prize, but not for this. Like his theory about soil humus got kind of like disproved. And his point, what Lehman and Kleber dusted off and started to talk about again, is the soil continuum model, which is extremely simple. It says that everything that lives is going to decompose, no matter what. Here are the living things and their residues when they die, when they get eaten, etc., manure, and they all become carbon dioxide through the decomposition process. Okay? And when we till the soil, etc., then all this organic matter becomes even more prone to decomposition. She needs to recharge sometimes a little bit. And he told me that she's going to show up during my talk, so I'm sorry about it. But I told her that it's okay. So the point is that plants, as they photosynthesize, take up that very same carbon dioxide, and this carbon dioxide is being turned over and over and over again in this entire system, okay? But if everything can decompose, then how on earth can organic matter persist in the soil, if not through that miraculous process, this humus formation process? It's really simple. It either gets logged into aggregates. Aggregates are these, I will show later in a more detail, but aggregates are these little soil conglomerates, like these soil aggregations, bubbles, chunks, which is bound together by microorganisms. And organic matter can be logged into these aggregates. I will show you the hierarchy of aggregates and you will understand it better. And the other option is to absorb on mineral surfaces. So that mineral component in the soil, the clay, the silt, and the sand, can hold, especially the clay, organic matter on its surface. Clay molecules have a charge. That's one thing, so they can hold onto a lot of things. And this organic matter is very sticky, so it can stick to the surface. So that's all. We have to make sure that that organic matter gets logged into aggregates and also stuck to the surfaces. So how does this look? So these are the two categories that we want to take care of. The mineral-associated organic matter, which is this amber-colored mineral particle in the soil that is coated by extracellular polysaccharides. Polysaccharides, sugars. Imagine honey, as if you were like coating this in honey, which is really sticky. This one is even stickier, that is produced by bacteria. And also dead bodies of bacteria, etc. Like that's one thing. And then the other is these teeny tiny 50 micrometers. 50 micrometers are like 20 hundredths of a millimeter. Like a fraction of a millimeter is the size of the persistent organic matter. Okay? So this is around like a 3,000 times the magnification. With the advent of electron microscopes, we are able to see it with our naked eyes. You know, sometimes we say that I only believe if I see. And before, chemistry was our tool to find out things about the tiny little world and the world of chemistry and the world of microbiology. But now we have really powerful microscopes and we are able to see reality, or at least some part of reality, with our naked eyes. So, particulate organic matter, you see that this has some cell walls, like some fabric. Fabric? No, rost. How is rost in rost? Hogy van angolul? Fiber, yeah, fiber. So you see some plant fiber here. So that's like a teeny tiny 50 micrometer plant fiber. And then there is mineral particles stuck to it. This is like a bigger soil mineral. And then it's held there with fungal hyphae and all these like glues that bacteria and roots and fungi, fungal filaments excrete. And then if you move closer, you also see that the fungal hyphae like holds this all together. The fungal hyphae, the diameter of a fungal hyphae is way much thinner than your hair. It's around 6-10 micrometers. It's tiny. Okay, it's if you divide a millimeter by 100, that's the diameter of a fungal hyphae. So that's what it's holding, these teeny tiny particles together. And then also there are the extracellular polysaccharides. Okay, so these are bacteria that are producing these polysaccharides that glue all these things together. So in order for your soil to have good organic matter, which retains water, which helps in nutrient cycling, what do you need? What do you need in your soil? Life. That's it. We have to make sure that our soil is alive. And here it is. This is a German research group they were around the first ones who showed that soil organic matter, the persistent soil organic matter, is mostly dead microbial bodies. And of course those plant debris, and of course these glues that they use to stick them together. So basically a bacteria glues itself to a mineral surface and then it dies or not, but gradually, like that's how organic matter is being built. Okay? And this is also very important, this research. It's done by Jennifer Dungite. And she just summarizes what I talked about so far, is that persistent organic matter is not due to chemical reactions, and they call it recalcitrance, but it's actually physical protection. And watch this really difficult diagram. We have our soil. This soil, this is the range where soil functions well. Here, it has enough water and enough oxygen to function. This is the range where it's too dry, and this is the range where it's too much water, so that's why it cannot function well. But imagine that everything is all right in the soil, there is enough water and there is enough air. Because microorganisms need air to breed, they are mostly anaerobic, and they also need water to live in, to reproduce, just like us. They are just like us in so many ways. So here's the good range where they can live well. Here is the organic matter that they want to eat. And here is the microbe or its enzyme. And here goes the magic. This microbe needs to get here. And the longer that organic matter can stay here, the more difficult for the microbe to reach it. Can the microbe get there or not? That's the question. And for the microbe to not decompose it right away, it needs to hide. It needs to be tucked away somewhere. in the aggregates or in the mineral surfaces. Okay? So basically this is again a summary. There is either mineral surfaces, aggregates, or substrate limitation, which means there is not enough nitrogen to decompose the carbon, or there is not enough air, or there is not enough water. Okay, these are the three components that can inhibit organic matter decomposition. Of course, you want some organic matter to decompose, but not all, and not all the time. Because organic matter decomposition drives nutrient cycling in the soil. That's what drives organic matter replenishment. So you need decomposition, but not faster decomposition than how it's being created. Okay? So here we go. Now I show you how to do it. The first is minimize soil disturbance. In the permaculture community, it's very rare that somebody actually digs their garden. Like you hear all these like no-dig garden, mulching, sheet mulching, lasagna garden, raised beds with like nice bedding. So you make sure that you never really turn around the soil in your garden. You either use a broad fork, or some people don't even use that, just use permanent beds with a thick compost mulch. In large-scale agriculture, it's also doable. I'm working with the Regenerative Farmers Association of Hungary and have been following the work for over a decade of many farmers who just stopped tilling their soils, and we see the improvement in organic matter content, in aggregation, in aggregate stability, in earthworm numbers. We see the improvement all the time. On this picture, you see a direct drill. He's putting wheat seeds into a corn. Can you see that? He's planting wheat into a corn residue. So the corn residue is covering the soil for him and helping to protect the surface of the soil, and also to provide some organic matter replenishment from the surface as well as from below ground. Okay, so do you see this picture? There's this beautiful house, kind of like a permaculture paradise. It's really nice, organic, you have beautiful air circulation, you collect rainwater, very eco-friendly, you have a nice garden, you grow your own vegetables, you have your community coming around every now and then, you have your family there, it's all beautiful, you have everything you need, food, water, and community, and a shelter. And then one day, that huge machine comes by, much bigger than your house, and just completely demolishes it. And all you have left is this stack of bricks. But you have the stack of bricks. So what do? You build a new house. At least try. It's not going to be as great as the previous one, because most of the things that you had there is kind of ruined. But there is still something, so you create a shack for yourself. And you still go by, you have food to eat, you have your friends over, it's working. But that ginormous machine comes again and ruins it again. And it goes on fall and spring, and it just happens over and over again. And at one point, like, how long do you think it would take for you to give up? Not that long, right? So when we disturb the soil, we are basically ruining the habitat for those people, for those animal people and microbe people and fungal people and plant people who on whom our life depends. So how do these aggregates work? I already kind of told you all this, so this is a summary. We have the microscopic size aggregates, like clay and silt size aggregates. A clay particle is 1 micrometer, 1,000th of a millimeter. A bacteria is the same size. So basically a bunch of bacteria takes mineral particles and organic matter and just binds all this together. And then these micro aggregates are being held together by fungal hyphae and also the glues that these bacteria and fungus produces. And this is the habitat for larger creatures, like larger, I mean like 10, 50, 100 micrometers, like amoebae, ciliate, nematodes, and so on. So these tiny creatures live here in the water-filled pore spaces because the tiniest soil microorganisms are living in water. And then these macro aggregates, still smaller than a centimeter, they are held together by plant roots, root hairs. There are more air-filled pores as well, so those creatures live here, like for example mites, springtails, and so on, who don't live in water, like arthropods for the most part. And then what you want to see in your garden when you take a handful of soil, that it just falls apart into 1 centimeter diameter soil aggregates. When that happens, you know that your soil is in a good condition. It doesn't flow out of your hand in between your fingers, and it doesn't stay in a block. It crumbles into these beautiful crumb-like soil aggregations. Okay? Soil food web. Show your hands if you haven't seen this before, the soil food web. So I can go in a little bit of details. Do you guys want me to? It's very simple. Again, you are like, yeah, okay. Photosynthesis. So we have this like, oh my God, carbon dioxide, climate change, everything is like so terrible now, and this is like a terrible compound that is going to make our life miserable. But actually, carbon dioxide is what we are all made out of. Plants and algae are able to photosynthesize and take this carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, this gas, and make it into organic matter, to amino acids, to sugars, to carbohydrates, and that's our main building block. We either get it from plants or we eat those who eat the plants. But at the end of the day, everything comes from that carbon dioxide that is being fixed with the help of sunlight. So how this all goes, there is all this organic matter. It's either living or dead organic matter that is being used by microorganisms. The first creatures that decompose or eat those plants alive or are in symbiosis with those plants are the fungi and the bacteria. And then there are some plant-feeding nematodes. Usually, you know, when your carrots are affected by nematodes, we don't really like that very much. But when we use some chemicals and kill those nematodes that are ruining your carrot, you're going to kill all the other nematodes, like the fungal and bacterial-feeding nematodes, or the predatory nematodes, who are actually able to eat the root-feeding nematodes. So the more complex this system is, the more they are able to eat one another and keep each other in check. And when a nematode or an earthworm, let's say a nematode, a bacterial-feeding nematode, eats a bacteria, then, which is in the plant root system, it also excretes something. And that something is the fertilizer right there in the root, at the root. I'm going to show you some pictures of that. Oh, have you ever buried some underwear in the soil? Not recently. Why not, Tracy? Come on. So my place is pretty sandy, and it's not very easy to fix a sandy soil. But basically here I buried this. Actually, I got it in the mail. These were new underwear, so which I know it's not a very Permi thing to bury a new underwear, but I thought if I'm going to show it to you, then I'm going to bury a new one. So if you bury a cotton underwear or a shirt or anything in the soil, you can test how alive it is. If there is enough moisture, then your cotton underwear is going to decompose. You can do it with tea bags as well. You don't have to use. But if you use tea bags, then use the ones that have a plastic filter, because otherwise the entire tea bag is going to decompose and you're not going to find it. So the more life there is, the more your underwear gets decomposed. And if there is not a whole lot of life, then it just becomes dirty. There is a project in Hungary with the Soil Institute. They sent out these underwears to hundreds of people in Hungary in the mail. And then everybody kept these for 60 days in their soils. And then you had to send it, not the underwear, but the pictures back. And then it kind of gave, this was kind of like a citizen science project, and it gave some idea about how soils are in Hungary. So bacteria, the primary decomposers. Most of the times they are these cocci shaped, like these little globes, or bacilli, who are these sticks. And then there is many different kinds, but these are the most prevalent. And one or two these little spheres attached together or more, or these little rods, longer rods, shorter rods, 3 rods together, blah, blah, blah. So it's all sorts of variation. As you can imagine, in the soil, there is 25,000 different species of bacteria. They are the most numerous in the soil, and they have multiple functions. They not only decompose, they can work in symbiosis with plants. They can be plant protecting agents, and of course, nutrient immobilizers, and so on and so forth. Fungi. This is an image of saprophytic fungi. There are 2 important groups in the soil. One of them is saprophytic, who decompose organic matter, and the other group is mycorrhizal fungi, who work in symbiosis with plants to provide nutrients. This is amoebae. I don't know how much you can see them. This is Archiella, a kind of amoebae, testate amoebas. Amoebas in the soil have silica cover, which protects them from harm and predators. And this is an amoeba without, this is called naked amoeba. Sometimes amoeba like to be naked. And then this is another, so these are Archiellas, and this is also a testate amoeba over here. And you also see on this image some organic matter. So this is how organic matter usually is in the soil. There is millions and gazillions of bacteria in one of these tiny microaggregates, and organic matter and those glues together. And the bacteria are these tiny little black dots. Some of them are not in focus. And you can hardly make it. This is 400 times magnification. It's not very easy to differentiate a bacteria and a clay particle unless they are moving. So what else? Oh, this is a ciliate. Ciliates like to eat bacteria in the soil. They are little nutrient immobilizers. When they excrete the bacteria, or what's left over from the bacteria, they fertilize right at the root. This is a nematode. a bacterial-feeding nematode, and also a dead mite next to it. This is some more fungal-eating nematodes. This is 100 times magnification. I found this in my compost. There is this organic matter aggregate, and all these nematodes are there feasting. You see fungal hyphae here, and these are like organic matter particles. Yeah, and they are just having a good time there, you know. Invited their friends over for some feast and who knows what else. So here is a fungal feeding nematode up close. It has this stylet, I think it's called in English. It can make a puncture onto the fungal hyphae and then just suck out the cytoplasm, like the juice, the fungal juice from it. The fungal juice. Just to make sure we're talking scientific terms. So here is a rotifer. So rotifers also have these like cilia that they move around and then they make water flow into their body, and then they have this body part which they like squish, and they are able to, like, as bacteria with the water flows into their body, they are squishing it, and also the bacteria juice comes out from them, and that's how they feed themselves and then excrete what they don't need. Springtails, they are mostly fungus-eating creatures. Mites as well, like shredding, decomposition. Many of them are eating fungi. And earthworms, these beautiful, lovely creatures, the engineers of soil. They also, did you know that earthworms have gizzards? Do you know what a gizzard is? Do you know like how chickens eat their food? They have that part, that body part, which is called gizzard, where they have tiny little pebbles, and when they eat, you know, the corn or the grain or seeds, those little pebbles in their gizzard like crush it. You know what I'm talking about? It's like an organ where they can crush food. Earthworms have a gizzard as well, and guess what? They also crush all the microbes that they eat, and they eat the bacteria, the fungal, the mite, and all those juices that are in there, the cytoplasm. So, and how they are also very good fermenters. They ferment food. How they do that? After rain, have you ever seen on the soil surface these tiny little holes with some worm castings around it? So there are those holes, and sometimes in those holes you see leaves pulled in. They look like a funnel. They are like twisted a little bit, and they are pulled into the soil. They don't need the leaves. They are not interested in that. But they pull it in to the earthworm channel just a little bit. And there is like a little bit moist, a little bit damp. There is lots of bacteria and lots of fungi. And those fungi and bacteria start to decompose the leaf. And when it's decomposed enough and there is enough fungi and bacteria, that's when the earthworm comes and eats what he cooks. It's really amazing. And then also they eat, like when they ingest their food, they also take in soil particles. So they mix all this together into beautiful soil. I truly believe that a healthy soil, for the most part, has been through the digestive system of an earthworm. And they are able to kill pathogenic microorganisms, pathogenic bacteria, in their gut system. And later in their gut, in their digestive system, they are producing beneficial bacteria. So they are basically changing the bad guys to the good guys in the soil. What else? They have 5 hearts. 5 hearts. They know how to love. Okay, let's move on. Always cover. You can cover a million ways. Who mulches their garden? Okay, most of you. Who uses living cover in their garden? Yeah, most of you probably do. I see about like 40% raising their hands. But also in your orchard, you can use living cover and so on. They are fighting now, so she's trying to seek protection from me. But I'm not interested in their fights because I have a boy as well. But he's shy to come here. Okay, so living covers. This was, I photographed this in an eco-village not an eco-village, in an organic farm in England. The previous was in Estonia, in an eco-village. So here, he's growing zucchini, and in between the rows of zucchini, he has clover as a cover. Clover fixes nitrogen, and at certain part of the growing season, it may release its nitrogen to the zucchini. I'm marginally sure about it. Maybe later in the growing season, it can release that nitrogen as well. Okay, so on broad acre, you can use also cover crops outside of the growing season. I was experimenting with it in my small garden as well. It's not very easy to kill the cover crops later. But basically, you can use nitrogen fixers, you can use buckwheat, all sorts of kind of cereal crops like oats and rye. And you can use Phacelia for bee pollination, and so on. So cover is very important for multiple reasons, but one of them is erosion. And the other is like being able to slow down water movement. So this is a rainwater simulator, and I'm just going to show you very, very quickly so you can understand why I put this picture here. So this is different soil samples. They were taken here on these trays, like intact soil samples. And the first one is not covered at all. The second one has like a little bit of like an organic cover. The third one has more, the fourth one even more, and the last one has a living cover. And then we have these jars. The front row is the jars that collect the surface runoff, the water that we lose, the water that rushes off away from our field. And underneath, we have jars that collect the water that infiltrates. So we make some artificial rain, about 2 millimeters, and then you see, like in front, most of that rain is flowing off the field, and none is collected underneath. So no water is infiltrating into the soil. All of them is running off because there is nothing to stop that rain. We are losing our water. Elég volt. This is how I do discipline. So, and then later, you see in the other extreme, like if you have some cover, then it is able to stop some water from flowing down the field and also helps for some to infiltrate. And then finally, if you have living cover, that's able to stop most of the rain and helps it to infiltrate into the soil. And then this is not enough. Watch the color of that water. Do you see the color of that water? If you have no cover, then that rainwater becomes brown because it's washing away that soil. However, if you have living roots, you have the microorganisms that glue the soil particles together, and they are unable to leave the soil. They stay where they are, and only water moves through the soil profile. If you have water flowing through your soil and bringing soil particles with it, it also causes compaction. All those fine clay is going to settle in deeper levels. So you must have living plant cover and living roots in order to have the best infiltration into your soil. Okay? Always have roots. Make sure that even outside of the growing season, you know, in October, November, December, January, February, you still have living roots in your soil. Like for one, you can do this with perennials, but you can also do this with annual plants. Like for example, in August, when most of my plants are about towards the end of their growing season, or September, or maybe sometimes October, I plant some covers that I can eat. Arugula, green peas, spinach, and that covers the soil. And also, even for a little bit of extra forage, you can go out to the garden and have a few pea shoots that you can use. I'm running out of time, and I have a few more slides. Like, how do you feel? Should I close it off, like, as soon as possible? Okay, I'm going to try to a bit. So, for roots and circulation of food in soil. So, plants photosynthesize and create sugars. And I told you that this sugar is being used to build, this carbon is being used to build their bodies. But that's not enough. 20 to 40% of that sugar, of that carbon that is being fixed through photosynthesis is being pumped into the soil as root exudates. So plants feed microbial life in soil. And they have various reasons to do that. Maybe they want to increase bacterial biomass, so they put out a lot of sugars. So the bacteria numbers increase. Maybe they want some sort of protection, so they actually put out some specialized chemicals. Maybe some special carbohydrates or amino acids to attract a certain bacteria that can bring in protection from a predator. Okay, there is thousands of different root exudates, and they have different functions in the soil. So this is how a root system looks like. Around the root trip, but also along the root, live most of the bacteria. And when a nematode comes in here and eats a bacteria, it fertilizes right at the root. And then also there are mycorrhizal interactions, like fungi is able to enter the plant and exchange carbon for other materials. Like, this is what plants have, carbon. And they use carbon as a currency for exchange. So they give sugars and other carbohydrates to the fungi, to the mycorrhizal fungi. And with those narrow, tiny hyphae, mycorrhizal fungi is able to go far away in the soil, much farther than the root can, and bring in phosphorus, nitrogen, water, and probably most of the periodic table. So they need these interactions. But if you disturb your soil all the time or don't have a continuous root presence, you compromise the function of mycorrhizal fungi. This is another way for microbes to support plants, endophytic bacteria, through the rhizophagy cycle. Well, first of all, did you guys know that plants are actually not vegetarian? Just so that you know. So through the rhizophagy cycle, bacteria enter the plants through the root tip, give off most of the things they have, their cell walls, their cytoplasm, everything, and exit the plant through its root hairs. Maybe it's only nucleus at this point, and goes and scavenges for nutrients again. and enters the plant again. This is the rhizophagy cycle. Basically, they enter the plant, give off their nutrients, and then go and scavenge for more. Okay? And John Kempf, regenerative agriculture expert, believes that in a natural system, most of the nutrient uptake for plants is through endophytic microorganisms, which are bacteria who participate in the rhizophagy cycle, and also fungi who participate in mycorrhizal symbiosis. Okay? And we completely compromise this in our modern agricultural system. We don't have this. And this is the reason why our food is not nutritious, because we are not able to bring in artificially all that nutrients. Okay, increased diversity. I'm sure this is not foreign for you from the permaculture community. Diversity, as Jeff Lawton said, diversity is nature's university. We just want to make sure that there is space for predatory insects in our garden. We want to make sure that horizontal disease transfer is cut off by planting plants from different species next to each other. Therefore, they are not going to be able to host, or even if they host the disease, it's not going to be able to go to the next plant. Also, diversity in root systems below ground is very important to have a diverse microbial population, and so on. And another example from broadacre agriculture, really quickly. This grower farms in southeast Hungary. This is another place where we don't have a whole lot of rain. And what he does, he grows crops, mostly rye and wheat, for flour production for bakeries. And what they do, they have their own flour mill, so they produce, like they have the entire production chain, and they sell directly to customers, mostly bakeries. And what they do, they are so dedicated to improve their soils that they only plant cash crops, their wheat and their rye, every second year. And every other year, they have cover crops. So they have an entire growing season, more than an entire growing season for the cover crops. And then they plant their barley and rye, not barley, their rye and wheat into the laid down cover crops. And the other thing they do when they plant their cereal crops, they use nitrogen fixers. They use legumes in their growing mix. So they plant this is a rye here that they just harvested a couple of weeks ago. In this rye, they have hairy vetch, they have red clover, they have peas, and they have field beans. And towards the end of the growing season, when the rye is bringing its seeds, these nitrogen-fixing legumes are giving up some of the fixed nitrogen to the plant. So you get a much higher protein content in your cereal crops, which means better quality bread at the end of the day. So I'm really proud of those farmers that I get to work with, because they are doing an amazing job to build soil as well as provide quality food for people. Diversity, agricultural diversity, improves a lot of ecosystem services, from water retention to pollination, without compromising yield. So it's actually scientifically proven as well that if we diversify our systems, we get multiple benefits out of it. So the last but not least in the soil health principles is integrate animals. In a simple hobby garden or in a smaller scale farm, it's relatively easy to integrate some sort of birds like chickens. They are scratching around, using their manure fertilize your gardens, remove insect pests outside of the growing season. You don't want to let them in during the growing season, of course. And then finally, there's so many examples of how you can integrate animals, but I brought here another big acre, broad acre. It kind of sounds funny in Hungary because we actually talk in hectares, but a large-scale farm from Hungary here with 700 hectares, and they are also using cover crops, and they are grazing their cover crops with cattle. So they have 80 heads of cattle that gradually, in a mob grazing style, gradually graze their cover crops. So they use way much less pesticides and herbicides to kill their cover crops, which is really wonderful. Another, from this same farm, it's another very important thing is that some of these farmers still use chemicals, but they use less and less and less, because all those ecosystem services that diversification and soil building creates reduces their need on fungicides, insecticides, and so on. So we should move to an agricultural system on small and large scale as well that support these 5 principles of not disturbing the soil, covering the soil all the time, having living roots 24/7, increasing diversity, and integrating animals to our systems, and all these within our particular context where we live. So a few books, if you want to read about these topics. For microbiology, Soil Biology Primer, mostly created by Elaine Ingham and her colleagues. And then in this soil food web work, there is this Teaming with Microbes. This was written by journalists, so very easy to read. Some textbook-like things if you want to get more scientific. And then also Nicole Masters, For the Love of Soil, is a very nice book to read. Gabe Brown's story of Dirt to Soil, which gives you a beautiful story of an American farmer who revitalized their soils in the past 40 years, like how they managed to rebuild soil in several hundred hectares. And then finally, the book by David Montgomery and Anne Bickley, his wife, is The Hidden Half of Nature, which I highly recommend. It was published quite a few years ago, and it gives you, shows you the interconnectedness of soil and humans. It talks a lot about the soil microbiome and its similarities to the human microbiome. And these go hand in hand. Without healthy soils and without healthy soil microbiome, we are not able to have a healthy microbiome ourselves. So with all that, some places where you can see me again talking. Next one is in a couple of weeks at GEN, the Global Eco-Village Network Gathering, which I highly recommend. I think you can still get tickets. It's going to be in Hungary, and a lot of really inspiring speakers and a beautiful community, and so on and so forth. The rest is more Hungarian. This is an international event. Okay, and you can find more info about me on my website, terravitka.com. And I really appreciate your attention, and I'm sorry I went a little bit over time. Maybe we started 5 minutes later as well.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm interested about small soil containers like house plants and balcony. Like, how would you adjust these 5 rules or apply these rules for such a small container?
Yeah, okay. Thank you for the question. So the question was about small containers like houseplants and plants outside as well in containers. What I've been doing, like for example with my houseplants, is to replenish life. I used compost extracts. Like basically you take some compost, shake it with water, and water your plants with that. And that helps for these processes to go on. At the same time, like a container environment is very hard not to disturb it. Sometimes you change that soil in it, but what you want to make sure that your nutrient cycling is working well there. And then with the outside containers, I often cover them with wood chips or a little bit composted wood chips to have like a nice surface cover. I usually add compost, like I make my own mixes from the garden. Like usually I use mole hills and mix it with compost, and that's my potting soil. And I also plant my outdoor plants, my more perennials that I have happen to keep in containers in these compost and mole mixes. Compost gradually decomposes so much that your soil is going to be less and less and less. So you want to replenish that. And sometimes you just have to take out the entire plant and disturb that. So it's very hard not to disturb this soil environment because you don't want to fill it from the top, because then you cover the roots or the stalks as well. So pretty much these are some principles that I use in containers. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Freddy?
Yeah, has there been any study comparing the nutrition values of crops? You know.
Very good question. Very good.
Very scientific proof that we eat something because it's just.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question. This is very important. And I've been closely working with Dan Kittredge. Have you heard his name? Who heard Dan Kittredge's name? He is the director of the Bionutrient Institute in Massachusetts. And they did a study across the globe, sampling tens of thousands of vegetables. It was partially a citizen science project as well, because they asked farmers to send in their crops. So the reason they did this, because they were curious whether the nutrient quality, the nutrient density of an organically grown food is higher than what you can get at the store from a conventional place. Because, we have these, I only buy local, I only buy organic, I don't care, I buy whatever I get at the grocery store. And normally you have kind of an idea about a hierarchy. You would think that organic is the best quality. And the thing is that he showed that a store-bought conventional food, vegetable, can be similar or better than an organic. Where it's coming from, it's not necessarily going to predict its nutrient quality. Because if you get some food from a sandy organic farm, I know someone who farms organic on 2,000 acres, and you just cannot, and he's plowing the soil, so there is no life in the soil. So the nutrient quality of that crop is going to be very minimal, and I tell you why. What they showed is that there is only one thing, only one measure that correlates with nutrient density in soil. And that's respiration, soil life. They measured how much the soil respires, and that correlates with how much life there is. And the higher the respiration was, the higher the nutrient density was in soil. So that's the point. It doesn't matter what label you have. The question is whether that soil where your food comes from is alive or it's not. If it's alive, then it's much more likely to have higher nutrient quality.
They looked also on the substances, like the artificial substances, because on one side you have like what you have as natural and good things, and on the other things what comes from farming, and that's where organic farming comes.
Very important point.
But then I also have one other addition is about you were showing the slide like where organic matter stays. And I was just adding, I was wondering, crude oil that's another form of soil organic matter, kind of, and that's a whole part of the story. Like we have to understand, like all the crude oil that we are just going to the air, that was once in this kind of cycle, and it's naturally went down and stored, and that's how our civilization is now just freeing up all this resource that once used to be part of the soil and all this cycle. And last to your question, I was wondering practically, do you have any information on how quickly soil life can restore? I mean, okay, you have no-till and you have the very conventional tillage process, but what is in between? So, for example, in our case, on our farm, we have some kind of shallow rotation. And the question is, because from what I see, that if there is a good crop, enough soil organic matter, then I suppose that after like 2 months it can recover completely. So you have the earthworms, you have the fungi, you have everything if it's there. So the question is like how quickly it can recover. Whether you have any data on that.
Okay. I also have a bunch of comments on your previous comments, but to answer your question first, to get on with that, it depends. It really depends. If you have life in your soil, even from a disturbance that you are doing there, it's able to recover reasonably quickly. There are stages. If you use a broad fork, the recovery rate is much faster. If you till or rotate your soil, but only like a shallow layer, and mix it in with compost. Do you mix it in? Yeah, so compost has a lot of microorganisms in it. If you are having a good source of compost. Compost is supposed to be dead and alive microorganisms. What I call compost is like basically a dead microbial biomass as well as some living. So that should help. But there you don't have the mycorrhizae. So the more you till, the less mycorrhizal fungi you have. If you have, for example, strips between the beds that are non-disturbed and mulched with wood chips or something that has a store of microorganisms and fungi, then that can help the restoration. Fungi can go very fast. If there is an opportunity, and if there are the spores and the hyphae, then it's able to reproduce. And if there is enough water and there is enough air, they can reproduce very quickly and, go into your soil within a couple days. So gradually, the life can come back. But still, and probably for practical reasons, it's easier for you right now to till your soil because otherwise it would be hard to plant in it. So make sure that you have enough life around, enough perennial coverage, enough mulching in between the beds so that you have a storehouse of microorganisms. And make sure that the compost you are using is good quality. Okay? So, and one more thing about like crude oil and things like that. Yes, we did put a lot of carbon into the atmosphere through crude oil, and we are not going to be able to put it back. So, I don't know, like if we ever going to stop using fossil fuels, probably not until we have some. So we just kind of, that's what the situation is. We are no different than any other animal, although I really hope that human consciousness is going to be able to raise to that level that we are able to see the consequences of our actions. As a measure that we can do right now to stabilize our climate is planting trees and replenishing organic matter in the soil and create rain. We have to think on landscape scale, create water-holding structures, ponds, and maybe swales, and those sort of things to replenish water in the soil and create organic matter so it can hold it. And that's how we can have local cloud formation, local rains. And yes, And I don't know if we're ever going to stop using fuels. I drove here and I apologize for that. But that's how I managed to do that. And your first comment was nutrition. Very important. Yes, that's a very important point as well, because this study that I was referencing to didn't measure, all the chemical residues in the food. It was only looking at nutritional quality. So it didn't measure like how much pesticides, insecticides, glyphosate, residues are in the store-bought stuff. That's a whole different story. Okay? This study was only focusing on nutritional quality. But that's very important, Freddy, as well to consider. So still, when I'm making a choice between conventional and organic, of course I choose organic, even though maybe it's the similar nutritional quality, at least it doesn't have the toxic chemicals in it, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, any more questions?
You mentioned soil compaction as it happens in the better soil and so on. And some people, when they buy, let's say, a field that has compacted soil, they say that they till it once to undo the compaction. My question is, is there an alternative way, like leaving the soil as it is, but ensuring that we have life in it? Can the compaction be undone?
Yep. Both ways is working. If it's very compacted, then, you kind of like weigh your needs and do you want to grow something in the first year and the second year and so on? So if you want to have food in that very year, you might till it. You may till it, because you want to have your tomatoes, your cucumbers, and etc. If you plant into that compacted soil first year, it's highly likely that your plant's going to suffer. If you are planting from seedlings, you can do, all these like lasagna gardens and sheet mulching and things like that. So you cover with cardboard, add some compost, add some straw or some organic matter on top, and then create holes and dig that little section where your seedling fits in. And that's already a disturbance for it. And this way you can kind of grow something and then bring back life to soil as well. So really it depends on the context, on your situation. Like what is your situation?
I don't have any land, but I was thinking like when buying a land, it's often conventionally treated, tilled, and so on, so it's very likely to be compacted.
Okay, so you are thinking about buying a land?
Yes.
Would you do like large-scale agriculture or more like veggie growing?
Large-scale veggie growing.
Large-scale veggie growing, okay. So if you want to have produce in the first year, you're probably going to do what Freddy's doing. They have a really nice system, so maybe you should talk to him how they did it. So you till in the first years, or there is also another one in Hungary that I know a little bit closer, Magosvölgy, where they were tilling for a while, but they also use a really thick compost mulch. You don't want to use too thick, but like a 5-10 centimeter compost mulch on top. And gradually, as you are growing year by year, you don't remove all the roots. Try to make sure that even when you harvest your plants, the roots stay there. And you can get like permanent beds gradually. But if it's very compacted and you want to actually produce something, then you might gonna end up shallow tilling it at least. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
So I said this was the last question. So this was the last question. Yeah.